Hey, my mouse works.
What?
They actually got my mouse, the right mouse over here.
This is not touchscreen music.
Get these screens to lock.
I think you guys are hot. Just so you know.
Okay, thank you.
You think we're what?
Your mics are hot.
That was a little goofy.
So whatever you say is gonna be on YouTube for now and forever.
No,
Just so you know.
including this.
I'm just trying to make sure the video's going. The mics are hot, definitely.
Well, there's no staff report. All they do is
But
basically
I
say
don't know if
what
the
they
video's
want. They
working.
give you a track changes. This is just a repeat of the first page.
Thanks for coming.
That's a repeat page. See?
Okay.
That's a repeat page.
Well, I don't see the video working, but it says live, and the microphone is definitely on.
So, I
Okay,
mean,
so maybe we don't have
Let me
audio,
see.
but we have visual, or we have audio but not visual.
We have audio, but no visual yet.
Definitely have audio.
Not sure about visual. I know it.
I can see them in the one, two and three.
And Todd's gonna be able to, I think, spend the whole time up here.
Something's being.
I am.
How tall's the,
Well, that's what it.
how tall's the?
Glad to have you.
practice wall?
Maybe 30, maybe. Maybe.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
Maybe you have to plug your computer in.
But anyway.
Okay, well, I think, I don't know why there's no video, but you have audio, so.
Okay.
Good to go.
So we're good to go?
That's all the pushes.
All right.
They use.
Only get to do that now and then. We welcome everybody to the monthly meeting of the City of Sandy Planning Commission.
Want me to sit out there to see you feel better?
Yeah, yeah, to balance things
I'll
out.
take my microphone and sit out in the audience.
So this is Monday, September 23, 2019. We will begin our meeting with a roll call.
Commissioner Carlton?
Here.
Commissioner Wasowski?
Here.
Commissioner McLean-Wenzel?
Here.
Commissioner Logan? Here. Commissioner Mobley? Here. Commissioner Mayton?
Here.
Chairman Crosby?
Here. Got a full group tonight. Excellent. We had a packet of minutes, or one meeting from the August 26th meeting in our packet for approval. Any changes, additions, corrections?
Yes. On page 4 of 5, it says that the commissioners were fine with the interpretation of, by the attorney of Exhibit M, and it says that there were no votes, no votes, and I voted no.
No,
I
that
think-
was,
is that-
no.
That's the next piece?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
down below there.
It's confusing, because
It says moved by Don Carlton, seconded
Seconded
by
by
Todd. And then it gives the motion to recommend, and it just says carried.
Carried.
And we did a roll call vote, and she had voted no.
So what page is that on in there?
That's page 4 of 5, down towards the bottom, just above new business.
Okay,
It just says it carried, but we did a roll call.
okay, we can correct that.
Thank you.
So you voted no on
I
that?
voted no.
Okay.
Well, what's your procedure? If it's a roll call vote, don't you do different than if everybody just goes aye?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could do it two ways. You could put all the names and then put yes or no by them, or you could just vote 6-1 with this person, voting no, or this person abstaining. That's how we typically done them at the City of Sandy since I've been here. It's like if 6 people vote yes, it's just like 6-1 vote with this person voting no. That's how I've seen them written, but.
It seems like if you had the name, it would put with the vote next to it, you could put, Commissioner Mayton absent, or at least to say who was there.
Oh, that's
Well,
true,
you
'cause
probably,
Chris wasn't here.
if that person was absent, you wouldn't list them in the roll call vote. Cause we don't call a name if they're not here. And that would also be stated in the beginning of the minutes as to
For
who's
attendees,
present,
right.
so you'd know that he wasn't there.
Either way.
But what you're saying is your process is to list the vote, be 5-0, 6-0, 5-1, let's say 5-1, and if that's the case, then you would then also specifically list who voted no, because the assumption is everybody else voted.
Yeah, I mean, we can put all the yes votes. I was just looking at the last ones. If you go down to the last motion, I believe it is, I think we put all the yes, and then the one person that was no, we put as, Hollis.
Yes?
Do you see that in there?
No, don't see that.
You might have like an old version or something, let me see here.
This is the
Yeah,
one that.
mine does not show that either.
I think the wrong one might have been uploaded. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely change it though.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the format's completely different there. When it just says carried, and we're up above, you're using up 5 lines for moved, seconded, no votes, abstentions, and
Just to
then
close the
motion.
hearing. And then the other one gets one line that says carried. on the
Okay,
main
yeah, we'll
motion.
correct that.
I move we accept the minutes as presented with the corrections noted.
There's another carried, by the way, at the very end, which is the vote to adjourn. That's, I'm only thinking about
Yeah,
format.
because
Good
this-
We all agree on that.
It's been
but-
moved and seconded, moved and seconded.
I wasn't here, so I couldn't do it.
To accept the minutes with corrections from August 26, 2019. Okay, so we'll do all in favor that we're here. Aye.
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 Any abstentions?
I abstained. I was not
One-
present.
One abstention because he was not here. I can do the next thing on the agenda very quickly because there's nobody in the audience, so there will be no requests from the floor. We have no old business, 2 items of new business, and they're both public hearings, and we'll jump right into them. The first one being the fish overlay, and I'm assuming David isn't here for me to ask that this is quasi judicial because it relates to specific property.
Correct.
So he's not on the phone?
No.
Okay, so we will open this hearing at 7:07. This is file 19021, the fish overlay map update. Any abstentions from the hearing body? Nothing? Any conflict of interest to declare? Nothing? Any ex parte contact? Okay, everybody's familiar with the location of the property that this is pertaining to. I call for any challenges to the jurisdiction of the planning commission, any challenge to any individual member. If you testify, you must raise all the issues at this hearing. Your comments should state why the application should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open. Staff report. It's been a while since we've seen you, Emily.
Yeah, I
Seems-
know. Okay, just waiting on the computer.
For some reason, our other computer has disappeared.
So this is kind of more of a housekeeping formality.
Sure they pop it up.
Is it popping up on your screens?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know what, if that's the new. Yeah, that's better.
So if you kind of recall, back in June of 2017, we expanded the urban growth boundary, and at that time, our current flood slope hazard overlay on the map was only done to the old UGB boundary. So when these 2 properties annexed, we just sort of missed that when we were undergoing that process and doing the zone change from rural residential farming, whatever it was, to single-family residential, that at that same time we should have also pulled in the FSH overlay because that is also technically, it's an overlay on the zoning map, so it is a zone change as well. So it should have been all part of that process, and in the future now, that's how any new annexations will have to be mapping that flood slope hazard, and it will just come through with that one zone change in that one process, as we're changing the rest of the zone to single-family residential or whatever it is. So we just missed that piece for these ones, and there's gonna be, I think, at least 2 more that will be coming before you at some point when they develop in the future. That same thing, they annexed after the UGB expansion. We changed the base zone, but we did not include the overlay in that zone change. So just a heads up, this will happen again. It may happen as part of their development, or it may happen, we may just bring them separately, I'm not sure, it kind of all depends. But for now, we're bringing these 2. So this map just shows where that flood slope hazard overlay goes. It's an overlay analysis area about 200 feet from Tickle Creek, or 100 from the top of bank of Tickle Creek, or 100 feet from any other perennial stream.
It's the black area.
It's, the black shaded area on there. And these were just derived from, the applicant. So this is the Jacoby Heights subdivision. At that stage, they mapped the top of bank and then the 200-foot analysis area. So we just got the CAD file from the applicant's engineer to get that mapping correct, and transfer that into our GIS layer. And then this is the one from the Bird annexation that just went through fairly recently. And again, different engineering firm, but they mapped top of bank and then the 200 feet back from Tickle Creek. So I guess that's pretty much it. I don't know if there's any questions. It's sort of just housekeeping formality. Heads up, it'll happen again. But from any annexation here on out, that does have flood slope hazard, we will be just doing this as one process.
Didn't the applicants, they were aware that it was FSH? I thought,
Yeah.
didn't they design for that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
No, these have already been mapped and everything, so they're on, it's just that we have to go through the formal process of updating the zoning map, and that
Right.
requires notice to DLCD and bringing it before you guys, and then you'll make your recommendation, we'll bring it to council, and then they'll make the decision. So, just like any other zone change.
Right.
It just happens to be an overlay as opposed to an actual base zone, but.
Didn't we reach out to DLCD and ask them for their input on?
Yeah, I mean, we put it on their.
And I think we reached out
noticing
other than
thing,
that.
whatever. Yeah.
Okay.
So are we approving to send it to city council? Or
You're
just
making a
telling-
recommendation of
Okay.
whatever you recommend. But it would be, to adopt the flood and slope hazard overlay district for these 2 recently annexed properties, or properties that were annexed after the UGB expansion.
And the city still owns these properties?
No, these
No,
are
these are
owned by
private. They're
individuals, yeah.
No, you had hearings on one of these.
One of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Already.
And the other one just annexed, I think, earlier this year.
One's a Bloom subdivision, right?
Bird.
Bird.
Annexation.
The Bird annexation, and then the Jacoby Heights subdivision.
We gotta close the public hearing first.
Quick question, Exhibit C is basically a detailed map, with slopes and distances and, pretty analytical. The other one is like this. So at the end of the day, is there one that's to this level of detail for the other piece of property? It's this one?
No, there's
Eventually, a
just the 2.
surveyor's gotta go mark that on the ground at some point in time.
We have a CAD file for each of them that I don't have, because I don't have that program on my computer. But, it's just one map contains more information than just the top of bank and the 200-foot setback, and then the other map is just, doesn't
Yeah.
have that same.
Yeah, the only
slope,
question I kinda
so.
have is, this one is diagrammatic, of course, close. This is kind of a slope map, and of course, you can determine that. This one, looks like a serious proposal of where the line is based upon distances. So I just was wondering, this is what we're proposing, and we don't have this level of detail for this, but I'm just asking if it
It is on
exists.
there. It's actually marked on there. Top of bank's marked, and then the 200 feet from top of bank is marked. It's just a line. There's just a lot of other
Yeah.
stuff on that
I
map
had
that
to look
makes
for
it.
too.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of.
But the actual,
Color.
the map that has both of the properties with the shaded flood slope hazard, that's derived in GIS from their actual CAD file, so it's the more accurate.
I mean, that's the accuracy we're looking for. That's what we're approving, basically.
Yeah, well,
That's
yeah,
recommended.
you're basically approving the map. So those two properties with the flood slope hazard overlay.
Okay, I'm gonna move us on and just speed things up and just state for the records and the minutes that because there is nobody here, that there is no, well, the applicant's already made the presentation. There is no proponent or opponent testimony. There's no other questions. Staff recap was kind of a moot point right now. For the rebuttal, we'll go to a motion to close and we can discuss.
I move we close the public hearing.
A second.
Been moved and seconded to
Sorry.
close the public hearing. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now we can discuss. Any concerns, questions?
Yeah, I think we make a motion, move on.
I think I just had one, and this was just from my reading of this. That's why I asked the question about who owns it, because I think it's on page 2. It says under background factual information, it says applicant owner, it says City of Sandy. So that's why I was a little confused by whether it was an applicant or somebody that owns the property, or whether the city does. So is,
We're the applicant.
am
It
I
should just
reading
say
that
probably
wrong?
applicant, yeah, it's probably just from a template where it normally, often it's the applicant and owner are the same. Probably just didn't delete owner, is my guess.
Oh, I see where you see it.
It just
Okay.
says to me, it says the applicant or owner is the City of Sandy, so that's why I was asking if we own the property. And then if we don't own the property, it made it more
Yeah,
inhibiting to me to say, should we make that decision without looking at what the applicant said? But I kind of remember the
Well,
bird
it says
annexation.
applicant / owner, so it's a legitimate
yeah,
question.
well, yeah. The city's the applicant.
We're the applicant this time because we missed it, and rather than make them pay to come back and go
Mhm.
through a type 4, because it would have to go to you guys and then city council, we're just bringing it through.
It just takes-
So we did
okay.
not charge the applicants to do this zone change.
And that makes sense to me.
And they were notified, I believe, right?
Yeah, they're all notified. I mean, they provided us with the maps, like they did it, one did it as part of the annexation, we just caught it later, and the other one did it as part of the development of the property. So they have to, the flood slope hazard is there.
No matter what, right?
Yeah, it's just a matter of officially adopting the updated map that has to go through this state
Mhm.
Process.
So,
I'm just curious, as the owner, if the city's the applicant and it's quasi judicial, do they have to sign on the application document? Or can the city do a process like that without?
I don't know, we didn't even fill out an application document.
No.
We didn't fill out an
Which is
application.
the
Okay,
map update.
just curious.
It's a good question. I don't know if I know the answer to that.
They're gonna apply and
But
approve it
the
to
owner
themselves.
doesn't
It
have
sounds
to
like a
approve
circle to
it.
me.
Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, generally, I mean, they're
No,
both on
because when we
board, but-
originally did the fish overlay, we didn't go to every property owner.
But isn't that usually legislative?
This is.
No,
Well, this is quasi because it's specific, yeah.
If you were to actually apply the fish overlay, I would have to look at how we did it back when we did it, but that would be quasi judicial. Because it's a zoning map change and it's affecting individual property owners.
Okay.
And I can't say I guarantee this, but I almost guarantee that we did not get every one of those property owners to like sign
Sure.
that they were okay with us putting on the zoning map.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way.
No. There's a ton of people,
I
and
mean,
I'm
we
one
did-
of them.
You would have signed it, right?
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you remember anything?
Yeah, I mean, we're not, basically, if we wouldn't have done it this way, the other option is that we could have basically said, okay, property owners, if you're not comfortable with us forwarding this for a recommendation to planning commission or city council, then before you develop, you're gonna have to go through a zone map change, and, cost a couple grand, and then they'd have to bring it before you guys. So we were trying to just help out that when they do the subdivision proposal or when they move forward, that it would just sort of be map form, so.
Mhm.
And we did notice them, and I don't think we received any comments at all, so.
No, nothing. I did talk to one of them who just was just confused. It's like, wait, didn't this annexation just go through or whatever? And so I just explained what I explained, that we just missed this piece of the zone
Mhm.
change during that, and so we're bringing it, so we're not paying, they're not paying again.
Okay.
Yeah, it is a little odd.
Mhm. But we're getting it done.
Yes.
Okay,
I think the bird annexation, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it actually had a condition with with the ordinance, the annexation ordinance that said the fish has to be mapped prior to any future development on the property.
oh.
I know we did it with the Bloom annexation when we just annexed that one.
It was
Mhm.
brought up for wind.
Yeah, so basically with those ordinances for those annexations, they're
Yeah.
committing to that with the conditions.
Right, and it couldn't be, nothing could be built until that was
Correct,
mapped.
yeah.
All right, we'll take a motion. I think, sounds like we're ready.
I'll make a recommendation of approval to city council that the proposed zone map amendment be approved to update the FSH overlay to include the two subject lots in 19-021.
I second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to forward our recommendation to city council to approve the update to the fish overlay. Roll call vote.
Commissioner Carlton,
Yes.
Commissioner Lasowski,
Yes.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel,
Yes.
Commissioner Logan,
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley,
Yes.
Commissioner Mayton,
Yes.
and Chairman Crosby.
Yes. Motion carried. We're on a roll, folks. Okay, now this next one is legislative, isn't it?
Correct, that's sure correct.
Good. Okay, so we will open this public hearing at 7:22. This is modification to the code chapter 17-44. Any abstentions from the planning commission? Any conflict of interest? Nothing? Any challenge to the jurisdiction of the planning commission or any challenge to any individual members? If you testify, you must raise all issues at this hearing. Your comment should state why the legislative amendment should or should not be approved, or include proposed modifications you believe are necessary for approval according to the standards. If you do not raise specific issues at the final evidentiary hearing or by close of the record, or fail to provide statements or evidence to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue, you will not be able to appeal the decision to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that particular issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Any party has the right to request a continuance of the public hearing, or in the alternative, to have the record remain open for 7 days. Staff report.
So this one's kind of an interesting one. I'll kind of give you kind of what kind of prompted this, and that's we've been getting some interest from property developers out of Portland, primarily, of coming to Sandy and buying some of the commercial land and developing it with a mixed use. So you'd have commercial on the ground floor with residential, so probably apartments or condos above that. Currently, we allow for stuff like that in the C1 zone, so within our downtown. But in the C2 zone, there are several properties for sale right now. And the only way to accomplish that request would be through a planned development. So currently, there is no permitted use for residential. And I feel, and I talked to the other staff members as well, and we feel that's kind of a hurdle. If we want to see successful commercial, a lot of case studies show that the best way to do that is to have residential right around it, kind of like what they've done all around Portland. So we thought to simplify the process, we would actually have the C2 zone kind of match the C1 zone in the sense that residential above, behind, or I forget what the third one is, sorry, I'm blanking on it.
Well, you put, you here, you put beside.
Yeah,
You said
beside, it reads the same as the C1 zone. And then that way they wouldn't have to go through a PD process. So the difference between those two processes is with what we're proposing tonight is that an applicant can buy a piece of property, go through a pre-app meeting, and then go through a design review and do mixed use on a piece of C2 property. Currently, how it would be set up is they would have to do the pre-app, come in, go through a PD process, so bring that to planning commission, then you would give a recommendation, and they would have to bring that to city council, because effectively a PD is a zone change. And then it has all these time limitations tied to it for when you get your approval, and then when you have to do your detailed analysis. So it's a much more arduous task, and we feel that if we wanna have successful commercial and blend it with residential, we should make it easier to get through that process, not harder. A couple of the other things that we're trying to accomplish with the code changes as well are that if the residential is not above the commercial, then you would have to meet the R3 zoning standards. If it's above, then we feel that as long as you can meet the parking requirements and the landscaping and setbacks and everything else, that you really shouldn't be held to that density standard. You should be able to have a higher density, because that's what you kind of wanted, a mixed-use, more dense area. The other couple changes are, one of them is related to this same thing in that we're looking at increasing the height to 55 feet. Because what I've been getting inquiries about is that several of the investors that want to do this want to do it like a 4-story building. And they find our current, so the first floor would be retail and then 3 floors of residential. And they find our current code at 45 feet. Even though we measure to the middle of the gable with that 45 feet would be very hard to accomplish. So that 55 feet would give them another 10-foot of wiggle room. And then the last code change that we're proposing doesn't have anything to do with this, the rest of what I've just been talking about, but it's basically increasing the percentage of outdoor sales area from 15% to 20% without going through a conditional use permit process. And so it just gives people a little bit more wiggle room. So like the Tractor Supply store, that's in the I-1 zone, but if they were in C2 like this, then they would have been able to just do their 17 or 18% without a variance procedure, what they were looking for. And we are seeing, I don't really know where the 15% number ever came from, and can't really define that, so we think 20% makes just as much sense, so that's the proposal. With these code changes, I have reached out to All County, because they were the ones that mainly had questions around our last code proposals, and they've looked at these. They give a few suggestions around the density stuff, which we incorporated. And I've also reached out to the FAA and also, I think it's in there, the Oregon, some other administration that deals with flight. And they've actually given us a file number, but no official comments yet.
No, there aren't any, well, it's the FAA and then the Oregon Department of Aviation.
Yeah,
but
there you
there's
go.
no airports in the area.
Well, there is the airport down there, or the, you know, the old one down there by the Oral Hole, and I guess I've heard from back in the 70s or 80s, there was some discussion about increasing heights in town, and they got involved. So I just wanted to make sure that, I know, but I just wanted to make sure that the FAA or nobody else had any concerns. I don't see how there would be, because there's trees in our downtown taller than that, or in our town taller.
Yeah, I mean, given where that airport is, I mean, somebody can always come in here and say something, but gee whiz, I mean, that's where they hold the pancake breakfast now.
Right.
And, I mean, you're going down, you're out of town a ways there.
So we didn't
You're way
contact-
you're way below Sandy.
Yeah, we
You're
didn't
in the
actually,
canyon.
we didn't contact that airport. I contacted the FAA and the Oregon Aviation, because they're the ones that actually enforce and regulate this stuff, so. They have given us a case number, that's been it, and then we did receive a letter, who was that from again? Fair Housing,
Oh, yeah.
I forgot to include it, sorry,
Oh.
but it was basically.
The standard letter.
That boilerplate.
It was their standard, well, no, it was a little different, it was, oh, can I get a copy of what these changes are, and we sent them, and that's.
Yeah,
that
it
was
wasn't really a comment, it was
Yeah, it
more
wasn't-
just
it was an
like
inquiry.
and it was
request.
somebody working with Fair, it was like a different company. I don't remember what they were called.
And that's why I didn't
Working
include
with
it
Fair
tonight,
Housing.
because it wasn't an official comment even, it was just a request for information, so.
My biggest question is more technical, I guess. The above is fine, you know, I mean, that's all over the place. When you go to the side, mainly the side, I'm not sure about the back, what that would mean, but, you know, we've already gone through the land use planning to increase the urban growth boundary. And so we're actually taking commercial land now and putting it into residential. So don't we have to do an analysis to show that we have excess commercial to allow for that?
I reached
Don't
out
we
to
get
the-
into a loop there?
Yeah, no, I got your point, and we actually thought of the same thing, and I reached out to DLCD, which is the organization that approves the urban growth boundary expansion, and they said they were in high support of the proposal, and Yeah, they didn't say any other analysis was needed.
Well, I mean, I know it's in vogue, it's coming out of Salem.
Right,
but
exactly.
At the end of the day, you know, I don't have any problem with going up, because that's where we're common. And when you say behind, I mean, I'm not sure what that means, because it doesn't sound like very impacting and how that would even make any sense. But when you say beside, I mean, what's the worst case scenario? You know, a big piece of commercial land turning into R3? Because you said beside, so that's one that's got me perplexed. You know, one level of commercial with residential above is just really common stuff. And a good use of space. But how do you keep the side from becoming,
Correct.
what do you, I mean, I'll give you a simple example. What if you take the whole Skipper property and turn it into R3? What's to keep that from happening?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm tracking, but could you conceivably have a tall unit with stuff on top and then have everything else beside it? You've got all residential that's out on the street.
With how the code is proposed, you would still have to meet the R3 density regulations.
Okay,
And you'd still have to meet the parking requirements and everything else.
okay.
But that, you know, that's something that you guys could forward on as a recommendation, either to subtract that out of there, or, you know, I think the PD says that only 50%, the PD within the C2 zone, if you look at that code section, it's in the conditional use section there. It says up to 50% of the gross acreage can be residential. So
Okay,
you
yeah.
could put a limiter on it like that, is one option.
Mhm.
Or you could just say all residential has to be above commercial. Like, you could say the ground floor has to be commercial. I don't
Yeah, that
know.
one makes all kinds of sense to me as far as simple and easy.
Yeah.
Because when you say beside, it tells me there's gotta be a building to be beside.
Well, so there's two interpretations of that. It could be like one building with, say it's a city block, let's just make it easiest, and half that city block on the ground floor is commercial, and half that city block on the ground floor is residential, and then everything above that city block is residential.
Okay, but back to the discussion we just had on the Fun Time RV, which required a building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go down to the Skipper property. What's to keep them from turning the whole thing into R3? Do they have to put a small little commercial building there, and then everything else is on the side?
Well, that's what I'm saying, so if you
Yeah.
want something in like that, limiting it, then you would wanna recommend that within the code changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
I was
I
after.
actually kinda think the market should just decide that, but if you guys want to limit that, I mean, I'd rather see the Skipper property redeveloped as apartments, cause how a lot of this works is in land use planning, the more housing you have, the more demand there is for commercial. So the more apartments and the more condos and the more housing, the commercial will come after that, it will follow. But I get what you're saying, is
Yeah,
that
well,
if you
then-
want that land to be commercial, then you would wanna have some cap on this.
yeah, I mean, it's a chicken and an egg. I mean, we've
Mhm.
decided
definitely.
where we wanna have our residential. Now, we wanna recycle that decision and rezone the Skipper property residential, and then go find some more commercial, whatever. But, you know, at the end of the day, the zone map is the zone map, and, you know, we've run that one through to the end of the day, and the decision has been, you know, that'll be commercial. So to allow the potential for it all to go to residential just because of this code change, I'm not really in favor of that. I think that's circumventing the process.
I was reading in what Kelly just suggested, if you go down to the conditional use, even with the changes that they're recommending on C2, it still only allows residential uses to a maximum of 50% of the total gross acreage. So whatever the property is, they're only saying you can only put half of it residential anyway. So there's no way somebody can come in and consume the entire property unless they would receive a conditional usage, which this commission would either deny or give them.
But the other one too is if you had it as a strict residential, does, now that it's commercial, do you follow commercial setbacks? Do you follow commercial landscaping, or is it residential? I mean, there's a lot of little things that popped up in my mind like that. I mean, I'm all for.
It'd be
Aren't they
commercial.
following
So,
I mean, just like the C1 zone, it'd be all the commercial setbacks, the commercial building standards, yeah.
And I was, looking at, using your example of the city block where I come over, and if I have in one corner a commercial building, and then, I'm just being, 7/8 of it is, residential, and people bought in around that, is that, I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around it. I like the idea of above, okay? But just saying that you can come in and have residential, seems like it's a total zone change on that, and I'm not sure if I'm in favor of that side of it. And then also, if that comes out to be is, we're really strict on making sure that, well, then it would be Sandy style, the building, obviously. But then what about pedestrian access for, do we follow the design standards that we have for residential, for entrances, et cetera? I mean, how does that work? So, I'm not trying to confuse it, but I think McDonald says the devil's in the details, and I think maybe a little bit more meat to it in terms of how to make it work for it. So,
Well, that's where, the way it stands right now, I'm not in favor of the side. I don't know what to do with the back part. That's like sounds like you're gonna put an apartment behind Safeway. And I go, well, fine, you can't see it anyway. I mean, but that's what behind means to me, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because the commercial usually goes up to the property line. It's the beside part that I'm not in favor of unless we get some more details on it.
Yeah,
Because I agree with 100% of what you say, chicken and the egg. Well, we've decided where the chickens and the eggs are at this point.
Could you conceivably, I'm looking at the zoning map, and what I believe is the Skipper property, or at least it's a big lot, on the north side of 26. Could you conceivably come in there with this change and just build like a strip thing in the front of commercial, whether it had housing above or not, just commercial, and take all the back, that's a bunch of dirt, and turn it all into residential with the current wording? So it could be
I think so.
75% of that big lot, or whatever.
Yeah, I think you could. I mean, I don't, you know, you'd have to follow the density standards and everything else, so I don't know if it would pencil.
But the conditional use says residential uses are limited to maximum 50%.
50%.
So it
Yeah,
can be
residential.
exception.
Well, that's if it's a PD.
Oh, got it.
So if you want it to be part of the current proposed code changes, you would need to add it up to that part as well. You'd need to add it to the permitted use section that we're proposing.
so kind of the elephant in the room, without naming whoever it is, I really don't care, but are they looking to do, is it kind of like above? Which I think, when you said Portland, that's what I think of is, you know.
I think it's gonna depend what these code changes say. They're waiting to, I know one of the groups has a piece of property, and I can't go into it just in case
Yeah.
it becomes a hearing and stuff.
Sure.
But I know one of the investors that's looking to do something in Sandy, I think was gonna go the PD route, but is, you know, both of the people are really happy that we're looking at code changes, and they're just kinda waiting now to see what the code says.
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to summarize.
So I don't know what their proposal is. They haven't sent me anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that right now, as it stands, it's too open. I think it needs to be vetted out to a little bit more specificity to it. Again, I go back, myself, I'm okay with above, but the way it's, I understand it is, I could have a little building up front and around the
All
back,
around.
everywhere else, and
So
I
you gotta
don't
remember,
understand.
it reads the exact same as your C1 right now. It's just the only difference is the C2 has a larger piece of land.
correct.
Well,
But it's
but
the
that's
exact same.
But that's important.
No, but what I'm saying is that if you do have concerns with the code proposal, I would take a serious look at your C1, because right now, somebody could do kind of the same thing within our downtown,
Then-
which I think would be worse than a large piece of
Yeah.
property disconnected from the walkable area. So I'm saying, I think if you guys don't like what it's currently saying, we should look at changing the C1 zone too, in the future, because it's the exact same language.
But
The
they
exact
don't
same-
have,
me.
they don't have the big chunks in C1.
You could though. You could buy some old houses and some lots and combine them all into one and put an apartment complex with a tiny little commercial unit attached to it.
Then we should look at it then.
I mean, I think you could, like what you're saying is, you could potentially buy a city block in our downtown, knock down small buildings like on Pleasant Street, put an apartment. Now, would that be a bad thing? I don't know. It'd put more people in our downtown.
Yeah, I think the biggest, I agree with you on the consistency thing. My biggest thought is that, you know, C2 is kind of our reservation for, and somebody wants to come in and do something a little bigger than they could ever do in C1. Not, you know, that's on both ends of town, but we keep looking on the west end of town. And so back to the chicken and the egg, I agree. If you get a bunch of houses, then you get maybe business. Well, on the other hand, if you put in business, which create jobs, that means that you need houses to put them in. So which one comes first? So if you chew up the land for houses, you don't have any place for commercial, so you know, I can't create jobs. So where are those people? Well, they're all going to Portland. You know, so if we want to create jobs in Sandy, we got to reserve land so that commercial, you know, things can be built in Sandy where people will have jobs in Sandy.
I don't know if C2 really produces much living wage jobs, though. I think that's mainly industrial land.
Well, I don't like term living wage because that's all depends on how you want to live, but.
Well, you
at the
wouldn't be
end-
able to buy a single-family home with a job in like a grocery store or something like that, most likely, is all I'm saying.
So, but on the other hand, somebody might come in and put in a chip factory.
They wouldn't be able to do that in our C2 zone, though.
Well, they got a lot of land down there.
They would have to rezone that into like I1 or I2 to do manufacturing.
Yeah, well, they probably get it too.
Oh, yeah, no, they would.
But the point is that, you know, I'm just real concerned about it shortcutting all the work we did
Yeah.
to expand the urban growth boundary, build our whole zone map and say, here's R1, here's R2, here's R3. We already got the state legislature telling us that eventually we are going to have to change our code, and there was not gonna be anything as single-family residential anymore. It's not gonna, whatever number we wanna put on it, we can put on it. But you can take single-family residential, make the whole place duplexes, based upon that, once that law gets implemented. So, you know, think of, back to, you know, where do people wanna live? You know, where does somebody who wants to live in Sandy, wants to have a 2,300 square foot house, you know, with a family room, you know, 4 kids so they can stretch out, you know, the upsized house from the ones we're normally getting now, which are maybe 1,800 square feet. And if we don't, that's what my biggest concern a lot about why we wanted single-family residential, which we created in the last update to the urban growth boundary. We said that was a shortage and we generated it. And so, you know, these changes are coming kind of fast, based on the whole
Yeah, I
idea
mean,
of affordable housing, I guess, or
Yeah.
something like that.
I mean, that's mandated at the state level, like you said, so we don't have any ability to change any of that.
I know we don't have to change that,
Yeah.
but my point is, so we're all concerned about slamming more people in single-family residential, now we're slamming R3 into what was C2. So, you
Makes
know, all of a sudden, 2 of our zones went away.
Exactly, it seems like I mean, you're just you're turning the C2 into R3 if you wanted to do that.
Only
Well,
by
that depends.
50%.
That depends how you want the code
No,
to,
that-
what you want the code to say.
That
Ron.
applies to a planned unit.
So if you recommended
We would have
approval
to
what
move this
we were
statement
recommending, that's potentially
over
could
to
happen.
I
But
mean,
if you guys wanna put some limiters on that, like
Here.
only above, not behind or beside, and a percentage, then you wouldn't effectively be doing that at all, I don't think.
Well, that's what I think we're asking for a little more staff work on, and.
We're not gonna be able to put more staff work into this.
Well, then we'll probably vote it down. That's what
Yeah.
I would-
I mean, I'm just giving you a heads up.
passing it on.
We got like a ton of land use application, like so much, I mean, so.
But what you're saying is, and I'm just being a little facetious, is, I mean, this is one of the most important things I've seen in a couple of years.
Well,
Come
you're gonna be
through
seeing a
here.
bigger one soon,
Okay?
my parking one.
Well, I mean, I just hate it, and I'm not picking on you, but maybe I am, is when, well, we don't have time. So it's like, I'm sitting here, I hate voting on things when I feel like I'm kind of being pushed back into a corner on it.
I'm not, you
I
can
just think,
recommend,
why
you can
do I-
recommend denial, it doesn't
Yeah.
bother me one bit.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I mean, my vote would be no, just because I don't have all the information to say yes. And if you folks don't have the time to put into it, to bring it to us, then that's fine.
We do need to kind of, I think, bend the ear of the city council. I don't think our planning staff has nearly enough people to do the work that we're expecting them to do. with
Well,
all
then
this
they need to
development.
go to council and get more money and more staff.
They
but
can't do that, though. I mean, I'm just saying if the planning commission were to say, we want our planning department to have more staff so they can adequately address the issues that are coming up, I think that would be a really good thing for the planning commission to do.
We can do it afterwards. Right now, we're in this
Yeah, I
piece.
know.
And another thing that we can do on this one too, remember, we're just either sending it on to the council or not, but we can also send it on to them with, you know, the suggestions of, as Kelly said, you know, send it on as is, but we would recommend dropping the behind and beside, or we would recommend, 2 or 3 of us have found this sentence, residential uses are limited to a maximum of 50% of the total gross acreage, which right now is under a PUD. And we could say we'd like to move that under those things. But then it becomes a question of, to be honest with you, whether we have enough confidence that council would look at it seriously, and, because whatever they make is it, whatever call they make.
Well, I go back, at least for myself, is for, right now, we could change it again, is to have the R3 above, I'd eliminate behind, in front, to the side, and go above the commercial structure. So that's fine.
I personally don't have a problem with the way it's written. I go to Portland enough
Yeah.
often and see a lot of really neat developments that are like exactly in all these different scenarios, above, beside, and behind. And they're making a lot of good use with a lot of this land, especially old decrepit neighborhoods, and now they're really building them up to be nice.
Yeah, they're doing a nice job.
They do a really good job, and if these people are looking to come out here to do this, I don't really have that much of a
But
problem with it.
it's old decrepit. This is
This isn't being
untamed.
used,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, but I think you'll get more chickens and more eggs if they're a little more co-located instead of across town. I mean, there's a lot of vacant C2, so, and I think market demands will be such that probably wouldn't all build as R3, but
Yeah.
if we did put some limiters on there at 50% of gross acreage or whatever, it would give the ability to have some of that mixed-use development. Because I think expecting a large chunk of big box, traditional, large
Not
parking
gonna
lot
happen.
retail.
That was the
that's-
traffic
it's
issues.
old-fashioned.
Yeah, and it is old-fashioned.
I mean, I
We're
would-
making
I would-
suppositions we don't know anything about. We've already had increase on Costco and stuff like that, and they do their models, so, we just need to deal with what we have right now.
I mean, I would personally, as a citizen also in this town, would rather see the Lundin property all develop as like R3 with a little bit of commercial than like a Walmart and another big box. To me, I would rather see more residential, and hopefully that pressures more commercial to come to our town than like these giant warehouse big boxes. That's just me.
Yeah.
And I can't speak
Where
for
does the
everybody else.
commercial build then?
But I mean, I don't know.
but you
that-
would have it in the downstairs, or, you know, on the
You know,
the
I don't-
bottom
Yeah.
level.
I don't know. I mean, to me, I just don't see those big boxes like bringing a lot of living wage jobs. They bring a lot of traffic issues, just like apartments would too. But I don't know. For me, they're just not ideal.
Well, they're bringing services. Let's talk about what they're there for. What they pay is unimportant.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that you're going to see shift with the, how popular Amazon is and stuff too. I think a lot of these big boxes are going to become more and more obsolete.
I think you're right on that, and different people I know that have commercial properties, they're always looking out, not for retailers, they're looking for people that are selling services.
Yeah.
Okay, just because we all get probably a box a week, all of us at our home. Okay, so that's just reality of it. I'm there with, I think, with everybody else. But again, let's go back again on it. The mixed use, I think, is a good way to go. I just don't want myself a carte blanche on putting in apartments. So again, I go back to having it above, as of right now, unless I have more information in front of me.
I have no problem taking out of the side, or.
Yeah, I
Saturday
think
night
above
is-
and behind. I'm okay with taking out a side or putting some limit, like 50%.
I think there needs
But I
to
do
be
think mixed unit.
some
needs
kind
to
of
go.
solid definition of what behind means.
I'm a
I
little
got a-
torn
I got a-
with
I
this.
got a big piece square
I
up here.
don't know the long-term strategy that the commission's been trying to achieve. as a resident, I look at the C2 lands and say, wow, what's gonna go there one day? What are my kids gonna see? I don't think it's gonna be big box either. I think there's a limitation for residential. We can increase the population by changing that. I look at that properties and I look at Safeway and say, what should be behind Safeway? Is it an apartment building? What do I care if it is? It's not gonna do any damage to us. I'm a little concerned that about the behind and aside, just from context. Because if you put commercial at the base and build above it, we all agree that's good. What's wrong with putting residential next to it? And I'm just looking for opinion. Behind it, aside of it, as you said, it's everywhere in Portland downtown, where
Yeah.
they've taken that property and they've made it livable, they've made it walkable, and they've brought residents and mixed to that property, and it's been a beneficial to that community. And you could look at the regenerations on 23rd or in downtown, where they've done all of this work to help, grow it. Yet we're saying, I think we deserve that. And the way it's written, I don't want the property to be a commercial base and then the whole property become residential. I think it's kind of, for me, I'm a little bit tied to both having that and then putting some limitations, because I can see having a couple of those buildings on that property with commercial at the base and going up, and then residential behind or side of it. Just depends on the location.
Well,
That's,
Well, won't the developers, like, want to do that? I mean, if they're coming out here from Portland, they know what works.
and that behind and beside isn't necessarily a separate unit, they're attached.
Right.
A lot
They
of
could be,
times.
they wouldn't have
They
to
could
be.
be, and maybe that's
Well,
one thing you say is, it's attached as opposed to a separate unit.
from the history of doing this, is if you're not real specific on it, they will find a way to come in, and like I said, put a little building up, if you say it has to be beside, okay, I got my little building off here, and then the rest of it is R3. They met the qualifications, and there's nothing you can do, because that's what it says
Yeah,
on it.
that's,
So,
That's the
kind
problem
of
with
my
behind or
thought.
whatever. You got a big square here, you put a little something on the corner, everything is behind and beside.
yeah.
Unless you have a limitation on residential for the property, like that 50%
Right.
You
rule.
could say that on the ground level, or.
That's what I was thinking. We say, we can see it in Portland where they've done it, but we don't know if the houses behind it, if it was only one row of houses, or if it was 20 rows of houses that were in that development. Probably just one row because
Just one,
of their
because
lot
there's a
size.
street back there, it's already
But
developed.
we're looking at huge lots where, as you say, you could put a little bit of commercial up front and everything back. 4/5 of it could be residential.
So
That's
don't
what Don is
confuse
saying.
redevelopment in Portland with new development in Sandy. And when you got a big blank piece of land in C2, that's new development.
Yeah,
Now, if you want the new development to look like the redevelopment in Portland, then write that up that way and make that et cetera. But, that's why we're talking about this. Because just like Jerry said, in redevelopment, you got these streets. So they put commercial here, yeah, then they put residential behind it. That's all there is, because over here, there's another street with something.
right, and
You
somebody
follow me?
else's lot.
So it's different than going down to, the bigger blocks in C2, which are not developed now, and they're a blank slate. Okay?
But if they're not mixed use, which they're not written for today, then you're really limiting what goes in there, right?
Well, that's the purpose of zoning.
and again.
That's why you call it C2.
I think as a group here, tell me if I'm wrong, we're for the mixed use, okay?
Yeah, I think so.
It's not saying not for the mixed use, definitely for it. It's just how to keep it mixed use, not just a loophole to make it R3, okay? That's what I'm,
And that's where more of the asking for more defined work on the language, is
well,
what I heard.
I go back again,
What
is,
the staff's saying is we could stay here till 11 o'clock tonight and
Yeah.
try and figure that out, because they don't have time to do it.
That's not what we're saying. We're saying that if you give us a, hey, go and work on this, it's gonna be at least 6 months to a year before I can get something back
And we're
for
gonna
you.
lose those folks.
So that's what I'm telling you, Don. I'm telling you, with my current staffing limitations, I don't have.
Right, and what I'm
Days and
saying
days
is
to
it's more
spend on this.
important what we do is right than to rush through something because of that.
What I'm saying is I don't think that no matter how much research we do, there's gonna be anything that's exact science. I think what we need to do is take an educated guess, just like we do with all our development code, and say this is what we think as a body or an organization makes the most sense, and then see how that works. We can study this till we're blue in the face, but I don't know if that will turn out with a better determination than what you guys can come up with in an hour. Really don't.
I go back again is put it above, the side, behind, whatever, I think is, again, without more time to go through it, is the thing that makes the most sense to support the mixed use that's there. And again, somebody could come in and they'd say, well, this is what we're thinking, and then, oh, great, let's go back and change it up again.
Well, they could always apply for a planned development, and
Yeah.
go through the work.
So you
So-
suggesting removing beside and behind and approving it without those two in there?
Yeah, that's fine.
So I just wanna ask, cause I know we're here to interpret and enforce the things that are written, the laws. But you guys are our professional staff. I mean, you're trained in this, and what you're bringing before us sounds like you feel good about this, right? As somebody who's studied planning.
I mean, all we did was write it the exact same that the C1's currently written as.
Okay.
And if we wanna make modifications to that, I don't think from my 15 years of experience in land use planning that doing case studies of similar small towns is gonna prove anything. Because
Right.
most towns like Canby or Staten or Malala,
They don't have an interest in
they don't
that.
have mixed use.
Yeah, they
And
don't
what they do
don't
have
interest
is
in
very
it.
limited, so I don't know what we're gonna be studying. We can study Portland, we can
Mhm.
study Eugene, but those are not gonna be representative of what would be developed in Sandy.
Right.
So I think if we do a bunch of code studying, I think we're gonna be one of the first ones in the state to allow this much flexibility, is what I'm saying.
And Halls, one other thing is that we do here is we make recommendations to the city council
Right.
on changes to the development code. That's what this is, that's what this is.
That's what we do, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And I'm
I
not
get
saying
that,
what
but
we
I also
propo-
wanna, I mean, and I understand that that's our role. I also want to be respectful of the knowledge base that our staff
Yeah.
has too.
Yeah, no, and I think your discussion's really good. I think that if you wanna go with just, recommending just above, and I think if you just recommend above, then you don't really need the percentage, cause it's clear that
Correct.
it has to be
Right.
above.
Mhm.
I don't think
Now-
I
Would
would do that.
50% solve the problem? No.
In
And then
my
if they wanna
mind-
go besides or behind, they would have to do a PD.
Yeah.
I
That's what
don't
you
think-
do.
I mean,
don't
they can
think
still do
just-
it, it's just they do a planned development.
I don't think just above gives you enough
The
flexibility.
flexibility, yeah.
That's not the kind of development that's gonna go in a vacant C1 property.
Right.
So, I mean, if they're gonna develop mixed use, I think they need some beside to anchor it,
Mhm.
kind of build a neighborhood with some commercial and some residential. So I'm in favor of it as is, but I'd support like some limiting on percentage of acreage coverage, just to control how much residential builds, but.
I would
And
agree with
I
you.
appreciate Ron's point about the specificity of the text, because later, yeah, we'll go, oh, well, we should have had that wording, so
So how about?
I agree.
And I'm not saying to change my mind on just having it on the ground floor, but what about, instead of the 50%, tying the residential footprint somehow back to the commercial side, so that, again, the behind, beside, whatever, other 50% is, I'm just not gonna swallow it up with a 1% commercial, of the 50%,
Yeah, like frontage. or-
yeah.
Uh-huh.
You know, and again, I'm not sure how that would shake, but somehow tie back to the usage, some ratios, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
I do know, but I don't know what the numbers would be.
In my experience, some of that, like, real small format commercial in a residential neighborhood doesn't work very well. We've done a lot of projects to change that zoning back to residential, so somebody can build something on it, because they have a hard time making that sustainable. So I think the market would correct some of that, but. I
What
don't
I've
know,
been
it's a
told
good
is
point.
the more commercial you require, the less likely the mixed use is because the harder it is to get financing. Banks will lend on residential and have a very hard time lending on commercial.
Got it.
And so, I'm not saying that that should change your decision at all, I'm just saying that I think I do like the idea of having something in there limiting the amount of residential, so like an entire 80-acre swath is not 1 acre commercial and 79 acres residential.
Right.
I totally understand that, and it makes a lot of
Mhm.
sense. But I just don't know, like, I guess you could do the above and just see if anybody develops it that way. And then if they don't, we could open up the book and have it more flexible over time.
Yeah, I don't.
The other,
feel
the
like
other way of doing
everybody-
it is making it really
It's
flexible,
just above.
seeing what gets developed, and if we feel it's taking advantage of the zoning code, then we can modify it later on.
I'd like to hear more from you, Todd, because I know you've got, I mean, I heard you say that you're kind of you would go with it. And I think you've got more experience than anybody up here in terms of what flies out there, right?
Well, I guess I would just kind of rely more on the market. They're big pieces of property and they're very expensive, kind of high dollar developments, so in my experience, the people that develop those know what they're doing and have enough market experience, so I don't think they would develop something that, with a tiny bit of commercial, if it's not sustainable. I don't know. I think the mixed use would give some flexibility to build something creative or create some opportunity there that otherwise might be hard to realize without any residential use at all.
But just what Kelly said on it is, in terms of the financing, it's gonna be easier on the residential, which says, okay, it's gonna
Lots
go
of
more
residential.
residential.
Yeah.
So again, I'm coming back to, I'd like to see it fly, but without some parameters, something around it, it's essentially saying C2 is now R3, in my mind, okay?
That could be.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah.
Kelly, while we're continuing discussion, I have a question on, more of a procedural question. As I kind of alluded to before, we in the past, when we've had these things that we send on to city council, we have sometimes done it with,
look at
maybe
that.
oftentimes, that we recommended to send it on to city council with these suggestions, okay? Can we is it within our rights or our parameters to actually change the text of what you've given us?
For sure.
And then we would recommend that actual text, so that council is not looking at this plus our suggestions on the
No,
side.
whatever you suggest is, it's gonna be the suggestion. I'm not gonna take like a staff recommendation and a planning commission recommendation. Whatever you recommend is gonna be the recommendation. It's your
Okay.
recommendation.
You'll integrate
Okay.
it.
It's your
And then you'll-
recommendation to give. You can either deny the whole thing, just forward certain parts of it, forward modified parts of it. You could ask us to go back and look at it more, which we can do. I'm just saying that it's gonna not be for a while. So all those things it's your guys' meeting, it's your guys' option to decide.
So
what
it
you wanna
would
do.
change the text of what council would see.
Correct.
Okay.
It would, this one would have to be in there as part of the record,
Mhm.
but then we would refer to, here's the text that planning commission's recommending for approval.
Okay.
Right, and you could also do this, as you're saying, in a staged approach.
Could do that too.
What I'm
Yeah.
saying a staged approach is, there's certain consensus in this group, okay, and then there's places where we're concerned. You could move it forward with the consensus, okay, and the consensus is above. And if anybody wants to go beside or behind, they just do a planned development. There's nothing to stop anybody from doing that, okay? So that'll tell you, one thing's there, and they still have an avenue. Now, then, you can put that on the list, and as you have time to develop it, you can think it through, and you can always change it a second time by adding what's basically there.
Certainly.
Okay? I'm just concerned about this rush to judgment, because maybe somebody's walked in the door and says, hey, we got some money, we wanna do something. And I could care less about what the banks are gonna lend on. That's their problem. That's not our problem. You know, that's maybe a reality, but, you know, we're here to make decisions based upon what's best for Sandy. And, you know, a guy who wants to put in commercial, he gets his money from wherever he gets it. And if he doesn't have the money, maybe he's not gonna build a building.
I agree with 99% of that, with the exception of that, as the planning director, I am tasked with finding ways to make the code easier for applicants.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well,
and,
that's
and I
nothing
see
wrong
this
with
as
that.
a hurdle currently with
I,
the
I
PDs.
like Don's phase approach. It gets it out there and then comes back and we refine it. I mean, it's just that in itself, if you step back from it, that's a huge change, okay? That you say, now I'm permitting it just above, all right? We can go back and do it again. And I have a little bit of a side question to go along with it. It's kind of, in R3, if it was a true R3 going through, and in terms of, I think of, I just drove through the new development that's an R2 up in Sandy Heights with the nice little playground structures, you know, and drove around and it looks beautiful. How does those same amenity things fall into play in the commercial, it would be commercial R3 now? I'm not trying to make
Yeah.
it harder.
Well,
No,
that
that's-
was,
yeah,
I mean, that was
yeah, they
R3.
would.
They would.
That
Yeah,
was R3.
Landscaping, parking.
Yeah, there's nothing, in
like-
the code currently says if you have 5 units or greater, is it? You have to put in shared outdoor recreation, so it would apply.
Okay.
There's nothing in the code that I know of that would say like, this doesn't apply in the commercial zone.
I'm just going back to my going through, I mean, grew up in Portland, lived there most of my life. I'm going through the
Well, we got 3 or 4
redevelopment,
things.
there's not the, things that have been regentrified don't have those, I mean, they're just wedged in there,
Yeah.
okay? But in terms of those,
Mhm.
other than many, I haven't seen many of them, and that's driving by or walking to a shop, something like that.
I mean, quite a few of those do have those type of amenities on one of the floors. Because I have 3 friends that live in condos in the Pearl. And so one of the floors, like a portion of that floor is outdoor recreation area. It's not to that degree of like playground amenity and stuff, but
Okay.
there is some common outdoor area.
Okay. It's just not visible to me.
No,
going
if
by.
you look
Okay.
on Google Earth, you'll see it.
Write us down to your friends for the party, we can see.
What's that?
Write us down to your friends for the
Yeah.
party and we'll.
A cocktail party on the roof or something?
Yeah, we can see how Portland lives,
Okay.
we're in San Diego.
Would we be, I'm not trying to put words in mouths, but I'm trying to move things along. Would we be comfortable with forwarding to city council with this, but striking the beside and behind? And as Kelly has said, by doing that, we wouldn't have to put in the limitation, because the limitation would then be triggered by the minor
Well, the-
conditional use
well,
of
the
the
Be a
planned
conditional
unit.
use, planned
PUD.
development.
Yeah, which is limited to 50% of the total gross acreage.
Well, that's one approach, but couldn't we leave the beside and behind, but come in with a limitation on acreage
I like that
coverage?
better.
I think that still provides flexibility in development type for
Okay.
mixed use.
Yeah?
That's what I'd prefer.
Well,
And to echo that, if you take out those 2 words beside and behind, I think and I'm not a developer at all, but just as a person who looks at real estate, and I have in the past, I'm saying, I don't wanna do that fight. They just wanna do above, I'm not gonna go through all that process. But if I'm looking at this saying, oh, I can do almost whatever I want, and I can put half of the land residential and half commercial, that's the true sense of me, that's
That's
mixed
true.
use.
Yeah, that's
But I don't know if half's the right percentage, I'm just saying that's just whatever that
Yeah,
is.
the problem with 50% is it ends in a 0 and it's halfway from 0 to 100. It's got no rationale whatsoever.
So I would say I would concur with Todd, I'm more comfortable with leaving those words and putting a restriction on how much residential can go on the property. Because if that's what we're ultimately concerned with, that would eliminate it.
Can I throw one more idea out there?
Mhm.
That I kinda had, but I didn't put it on paper, is that the 50% thing is really odd to me, because I don't know if that means you can do 50%, 1% commercial, and then the other 49% can be parking and landscaping and stuff. So to me, that 50% of total gross acreage doesn't really make any sense. To me, what I would do, if you're gonna do something like that, would be more a percentage of total gross floor.
Footprint.
Percentage of
Total,
what?
well, total gross floor, so if you have a 50,000 square foot building, 10,000 square feet have to be commercial, and 40,000 square feet can be residential. I don't think associating the gross acreage to the
That makes
use makes a
sense.
lot of sense, actually.
Because you're going up.
I go back
Potentially
again,
could be
and
fine.
I'm go back and in terms of Don's phased approach, because we're talking about all these things here. I go back in, this is huge. And so once it gets out there and goes through, and typically these things, when we go through and recommend it, pretty much fly through city council. All right? So on that side, but we can come back and loosen the reins on it. Again, we are loosening the reins by saying just even above or having R3 there. And then, I mean, up until I got this a couple days ago and read about it, I never even thought it was a possibility. So I'm not sure why the rush to just open it up or to sit here, because I don't want to be here all night, and trying to figure out 50%, 49, gross, whatever. It's complicated. I'd like to do it as right as we can.
And that's why we have them, and if they have the
Yeah.
time or not, it's a whole nother issue we can talk to council about, but, you know, been sitting on this plate council for 13 years, and Ron's been on it for about 10. And so sometimes when we say things, it's because we're coming with maybe a little bit more experience, because we've had a problem and it come back, okay? We've been through the whole part of getting the urban growth boundary built. We fought some battles and all of the rest. So it might, that's why we're more cautious. I guess I would tend to say. So you can open it up, I think, a little bit, like Ron says, and then see what happens, and they can continue to study it. But it's pretty hard to untoll the bell,
That's it.
the way to maybe say it. And the greatest idea you can come up with, I would still be concerned about, because it sounds like a rush to judgment to me without adequate due diligence. And I agree with also what Ron said, is that, I don't know, there haven't been very many things that we've recommended in this from here to council that just doesn't, because they got bigger fish to fry in a lot of ways.
Right.
They don't even think that much about it, even though you have some ex-planning commissioners on that group. They forgot what we do, and they're worried about utility rates. So, yeah, I mean, I would support getting rid of the side behind right now, and which gives you above, and you just, that's fine, that's all you need, get rid of those two words. They can still do the plan development, and then we can work on this. Just like with the tree ordinance, we can work on it and make sure when it comes to us, it's what we really want and how we've thought it through.
Yeah, it's a complicated call.
Jerry, what do you think? I'm trying to.
Well, my one thing is more bigger picture, that I'm concerned that what we give city council is what we want because of what you said. So
The rubber stamp.
that they will, they won't have a discussion this long. So, and you know, it makes some sense where that shows that they have a lot of faith in us. So, and I'm not sure on the moving, you know, how quickly. I mean, I suppose if we just cross off the beside and behind, leave it at that, send it on, with the directive to, you know, if it is 6 months later, we come back with something else, a more defined code, you know, maybe there's a risk during those 6 months or something.
Well, there might be, but the reason the 50% is in and the plan development is in, I mean, the reason anything is a conditional use is deliberately, it says, yeah, this is okay, but we want to see how it's gonna be done.
Right.
That's the whole idea of a conditional use. It's permitted, it's just you can't go out there and do it without, and that's what we're basically saying. If we're concerned about how it's gonna be done, that's what everybody's kind of saying on the side and behind, all right? And so either you let them do that and we go through it, or we write it in code so we're okay with it. And we're trying to write it in code, we're okay with it here on the fly, and that's what I'm not for. I'm for going above, they can still do this, and then let's think about what do we really want it, what are some examples we like, what do we like, and then put that in code, and then maybe change it as it goes through. But as it stands right now, you know, somebody comes through the door and they say, we have an idea, and so the planning group comes to us and say, well, if we change the code, they can go do it. And the next thing you know, we end up with unintended consequences.
And I go, but the tree thing you brought up, I mean, we've been dealing with that for whatever, and we still don't have a new recommendation yet.
You're
right?
not gonna
It's
for a
being-
while either.
Huh?
Yeah,
You're
and
not gonna for a
I'm
while.
on the tree committee.
Okay, but I mean,
As long as they're working on it, that's.
Yeah, they're
We're
working
working
on
on
it,
it a
but
lot.
it's important, but just saying, you gotta come up with a tree ordinance tonight. I mean, I feel a little, I mean, being a little facetious, and maybe it's not a good example of it, but we can, again, from the experience, you can, it's hard to pull it back in once it's out. It's easier to let it more out. And we can also, us here, we can do our own workshop. We can get together and work on it.
Let's say we take out the beside or behind. Can city council just put it right back in?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
could, and we'd be good when we deal with the problems that result. But like I said, most of the time, we have a pretty good reason, we say that, but if we take those two out, I'm gonna suggest we're also gonna have a reason why we took them out, and that's gonna be provided to them. And the reason we took them out is, I would suggest, is one, we have concerns that it's not adequately well-defined. We want time so it can be adequately well-defined. And
Yeah, it's not that I think we're, somebody can represent us, we're all in favor of the mixed use, all right?
Yep.
Agreed.
It's just
Agree.
how it's implemented, okay? And to come in and try to figure that out tonight, I'm not prepared for it, so, but I'm kind of saying the same thing again, so I'll be quiet.
And in transparency, I would say that I'm more for what I originally said, but I haven't done any research, I haven't done any due diligence. I'm just speaking off of what I believe. I would propose that, I would really say, I wouldn't agree to anything until I was able to do some more research on my own to make an adequate, more well-informed decision. But I have to restate, I think taking beside and behind out really limits the people that are gonna look at that property then. I think it really would restrict what could go on that C2 as it sits today. And I really think if the concern is residential, you could achieve that by adding a subline A, limiting the amount of residential that's there. All of those have to come through the planning department anyway to see, and it still would make the code right. But I agree, I don't
if
wanna
it
rush
meets the
to.
code, we don't see it.
We don't see it.
I don't wanna rush to judgment. I don't think that we could make that change, and I would be comfortable with going home tonight and saying, we did the right thing, because I haven't really done any research on it other than what I read in the paperwork. I'm just trying to give my opinion on how I would like to see that.
Yeah, I've just sat here long enough and got thumped more than once. You haven't had a chance to get thumped yet.
What's,
True that.
how would you, those, I guess the two or three of you, how would you feel if about striking it, sending it on with the caveat, the rationale, with the caveat to ourselves that we're going to come back and revisit it? And, 6 months sounds like a long time away, but it isn't. It may only be 4 of our meetings. And I like the idea of doing our own little workshop, just to give staff more ideas. But would you be comfortable with that approach, knowing that this is not our final decision, that we want to fine tune it in the months ahead? I'm just curious. if
So
that
would you be forwarding anything to city council then? I'm a little confused what you.
Yeah, no, it would be forwarding with the striking the beside and
I
behind.
gotcha.
And that would be it.
Well, I
That would
think
be it.
if you do strike that, I think you have to strike the density part, because I think the density
Yeah,
part only applies if it's not above.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So I think that wouldn't even be.
Yes, the residential not above
Right,
commercial building,
yeah.
that
Agree.
box
That would just be out of there for the time being, I think.
would be struck.
What are you referring to, Jerry? I didn't quite follow that.
Right here,
Right.
development
The second
requirements.
sentence of number 1.
Okay.
letter A.
Are we still, I know we got hung up on this one thing, so if there's more here, there's the 55 foot, and there's the 20%, that would be forwarded, if we're okay with that.
Yeah, I think we're all
Mhm.
good
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, I'm talking about 17, 44, 30, and then the part where it says
First bar.
residential not above commercial buildings.
Mhm.
So that
Yeah.
part, because since everything would be above commercial buildings, I
Right.
don't think that would be a,
That one would go away.
Yeah.
I mean, I will get questions if you adopt it that way, as I think we would get questions now, is you have to allow a certain percentage of the ground floor to be residential to allow for like the entry and lobby into the upstairs. So, but most zoning codes, including ours on the mixed use sections, it doesn't speak to any of that, so.
That
And
just kinda
I don't-
sounds like it comes with the real estate, I mean.
Yeah, I don't even know how you regulate that, cause some developers might wanna have a small lobby, and then some might wanna have a bigger one. I don't know. I think if we get into that, that's kinda getting too much into the details, but that's just my opinion on it.
Again, if I was sitting there at the city council, it's like, hey, we're all behind this, okay? So that's the good news is.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how the implementation of it, there's some details to be worked out. Because once it goes in and then somebody comes in with a proposal, that's it. I met the code on November 23rd, 2019, I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if you
That-
put in, but if you put in something, like I wasn't facetious, because I'm a mathematician, but, you know, when people say 50%, remember, that's complete uncertainty. So, I mean, they always say 50% of this, 50% of that. Well, why not 45, why not 65? So, you know, do you really care if it's 50% residential, or should it really be 30? I mean, if you want to keep it primarily commercial, why are you going 50%? So my point is, you need to talk that through and be okay with it when you put it in the code. And we're trying to, none of us are saying we don't want to do it, we want to have time to think it through and do it correctly. Because at the end of the day, if you destroy all the commercial and turn it into residential, what's the purpose of commercial? And then you run into another problem down the road when somebody comes in and now you want a big block of land because they want to do something, and it's going to create a whole bunch of family wage jobs, and you don't have any land to put it on.
So Chair, I'd be a no to answer your question. If you just
Okay.
strike the letters and put above, I would be a no. And I would be a no because I just feel I need more time to talk about it.
Now, what if
And
you
address
didn't
it.
strike behind and a sidewalk?
Without an adjustment on a percent of either residential or commercial for the property, I would be a no. And I'm not prepared to, or equipped to give a number on what that number should be today.
But-
And I haven't done enough research to it.
I'm doing my
Right.
lobbying for you, okay? But what I'm proposing is a big step forward in terms of just doing it above from where we're at today. Right now, it's non-existent. So that's what I'm saying, is to move it forward to show our intention. Let's just go above and give the time to figure out the percentages to the side, behind. It doesn't preclude us from doing that at all in the future.
Right.
But it does move this forward for somebody that's coming into doing some mixed use to say, we're open to mixed use on this C2. If you have an idea of what you want to do, write it up, bring it in. Let's take a look at it.
I'm fearful you might have copious intent and build a bunch of apartment buildings with commercial space on the floor behind the Safeway. And it's just a bunch of commercial zone first floors with apartments above it.
Well, that's what you're saying
With
is-
no residential community
they-
surrounding it to encapsulate it.
They met the code. They can do, I can play the opposite way of having it with the 50% and 1% commercial. I mean, anyway.
Go ahead.
So, what would happen if we forwarded it on to city council with the above, but with the additional information to them that we're gonna have someone come and do a work meeting with us and talk to us specifically about mixed-use developments and what makes them work and not work?
I mean, I did my dissertation on mixed-use developments.
Thank you.
And I don't know what you're gonna, I mean, the only people that are gonna be able to give you a lot of advice on that are developers,
Uh-huh.
real
And they're
estate
gonna-
folks,
and they're not
and
gonna
bank
want the
folks.
restrictions.
Because they're the ones that know how these financially work, in my opinion. And like I said, I did a 2-year dissertation on this when I got my master's degree, so I don't know how you're gonna figure out.
Mm.
The percentages would just be based on opinion. There's not gonna be any like formulaic approach to it unless you ask a banker and he's gonna probably tell you, well, this is what we would lend, this much commercial compared to this much residential. I mean, in the Pearl, you see a 30-story building with one floor commercial. So you kinda know it's mainly residential, right? But I don't know who the expert or who this person that you would call in to give you answers. I think a lot of this is gonna be opinion-based.
Yeah.
It's
Well, and
it will be an opinion, but it still is based on what we kinda want it to look like. Do you still want it to look primarily commercial or primarily residential? Just to start in big picture, right? That's gonna run you one way of 50%. And so you come up with some number, and whatever it is, like 20 or 30, you put the number in, maybe it's 25. That's not dead. If somebody wants to do 30, they're just gonna come in and ask for a variance. I mean, there's ways for them to, continue to work our way around it, and make it work, because that's the way planning works. It's just kind of iterative, right? If we had a planned development coming in front of us right now in this area, we'd have something at least that we would say, oh, there's what that looks like. We'd have something. Right now, we don't have anything. And so what Ron and I are, I think, basically saying is we want to preserve the commercial character until we know better that we want to move the needle further towards residential, other than the above part.
I mean, what you could do is recommend just, if you guys want, you wanna recommend just the above, and then say, before we would be comfortable recommending anything beyond that, we would wanna look into it more.
Yeah,
That's
what I'm saying.
That's
that
all we're
was
saying.
my-
That's all I'm saying.
I mean, you
that
guys
was-
can say that, and then if we get around to looking into it in 6 months, great. If we don't, then it will probably be like a year.
And
But,
that's what I
in the
was
meantime, it
meaning
would be
by
a little
the-
more flexible than it currently is.
Or
Yeah.
we could also, in the meantime, try to contact out some successful developments that have some things that are as close as we can get to hear what's worked and why. So I'm sitting here from a kind of lack of education, other than my driving around out school, and that seems to work.
City of Milwaukee has one that I did some background research on. It's been there for a number of years now. And they have ground floor commercial facing their main drag there. It's just like a couple streets down from that Pietro's with like the guy that has the running feet there.
Yeah.
You've seen it.
Yeah.
So it's like a couple of buildings down from that. And they probably built it maybe 12, 13 years ago. And it has commercial facing the main drag. And then I think it's a 4 or 5 story building. Everything above is residential. And then if you go behind it, all the parking's in like a courtyard, and then they have residential for a whole nother 2 blocks. You would never know from the main drag. So I don't know what the percentage would be, but it's probably like 10% commercial. And it's a very successful, like highly touted thing for a town that size in the state of Oregon. So if you wanted to like hear from, I could get information from them or
That'd
something
be
like
awesome
that.
for me. Just-
But they did allow it beside and behind, but it is all, I think it's
Yeah.
like
I
all
can
one
see where
building.
that
If
would
you,
work.
if you
Yeah.
walk around any of those neighborhoods, they look like, if you're walking on street level, it feels like it's all commercial, unless you go up, unless you look up and then you see all the residential.
But that one in Milwaukee you're talking about is street tight. The
It is,
commercial
yeah.
street tight.
It is.
And that's not C2 here.
It's their C1, yeah.
Yeah, and that's my point, is in C2 generally, you don't have buildings that is right on the road. I mean, you have something, unfortunately, we have a lot of parking at times, but we all do have like the Panda Express, et cetera, where parking's on the side. So,
Yeah, I don't know of a lot of smaller, we could look into it over the next 6 months, year, but I don't know of a lot of, and maybe we'll find some that we're unaware of, but I don't know of a lot of smaller towns like Sandy that allow or have successful mixed use like in a C2 zone.
have what?
Successful mixed use within a C2 zone. Even like that new, I don't know the name of the subdivision or the development, probably some of you guys do, but it's that big like Crossroads development in Happy Valley. Even that is like a commercial traditional pad site with apartments, like, but that was all done together, but it's not mixed use in the sense of commercial on top or like
Yeah.
connected to
I think
the.
that's commercial and high density
See, I
residential.
think that's where,
Zoned that way, I think.
I think that's where, some of us might just think for a second, because the reference range we've used, you used the one in Portland, and this and all this, that's all like our C1. Everything is street tight. And so, yeah, et cetera. But we're trying to That's where you got it, you said. You picked up what was in C1, plumped it in C2. So what do you think, right? Well, you found out what you think. And if we thought it was all great, then it sounds like it all ought to be C1 then. So, but there's a reason C2 is C2, is my point. So we gotta be careful when you just pick something up from one and stick it in the other, it gets you a place to work from. Plagiarism is the best form of flattery, and then you can edit it up, but, I think we guys are wrong, just move forward with the up, tell them we wanna study the side and the back, and so they can move forward with something at this point. And if somebody is really hot to trot and wants to come into us with a planned development,
When was the
fine.
last time you got a plan development application?
Oh, I can't remember.
I've been here 8.5 years and we haven't had one. We do have one that somebody says they're gonna do, but we don't have an application, and we have another pre-app next month for one. But most people hate the idea of them. I'll
Can
just
you
be
do the
honest.
conceptual development plan and the detailed concurrently?
Yes. Our code does allow that.
but that's what's key. Think about the detail that go into it. And all that really is saying is it's conditional use, so we're thinking about it. And what we're saying on this other side is we're gonna allow a similar thing without really thinking about it. Those are pretty diametrically opposite things, and what I wanna see is in the middle, to where we've taken the thought process of the plan development, put it into where we want, so it's actually in the code, so they don't have to go through that work, but we thought it through. And we got it the way we want it.
And the message to somebody developing, buying, whatever is, you can send out very quickly is, we are open to the mixed use, okay, which is not today. But that's a very clear signal that, now how we're doing it, I mean, we're working on it. What do you have planned, again?
Well, if we were to forward it on with our recommendation of striking the beside and behind, it would be available today.
Yeah.
I mean, soon. Right.
Yeah, not yet.
Right, I mean.
But right now, a big box could come there, right?
Well, still could come in.
Yeah, that could still be the case though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the
Yeah.
reason C2 exists, guys.
Mhm.
We're not anti-big box. We're not pro-small box. We're here to try and create
I'm just
a
asking for
commercial
clarification.
land. And the key is we do have several of the biggest parcels. If somebody wanted to do anything with a big vision, we do have in C2. So that's where I'm a little bit reluctant, is to be careful. We don't know. And we might be in recession in 8 months too. And this whole idea just goes.
Well, then you'll wanna open up the code and allow behind and beside.
Well, maybe, but remember, I've sat here and gone through 2 planning commission meetings a month, 2 subdivisions at each one for a year plus, and then a bunch of them, no, and there happens, because that's the way it goes.
Well, let me restate that. Your city council would wanna open up the zoning code to allow more behind and beside.
Well, assuming that somebody's gonna build a house, if there's a recession, there's a recession.
And I've said this for years, the thing, that piece of land down there, from going back to my past life, I would love to see it be kind of more of a business park, okay? Or a good medium-sized company comes in, kind of anchors it with office space, in terms of commercial, but office space in there with the mixed residential. Sandy has so many amenities to offer, something like that. So it doesn't have to be a Wendy's or whatever. What, I mean,
A
maybe.
brew pub, maybe.
A brew pub is fine, there's room for all kinds of folks.
We know a guy who voted for a brew pub.
Oh, Mr. Benson. But, there's a lot of things that are out there, and trying to get the need for that. I mean, I wanna see the town grow,
Mhm.
but anyway.
I mean, it is growing. I mean, every house that we seem to be plugging, every house that's being built appears to be being bought.
Is
in
the
ones
PD
places
process
Well, they're
really
being
that
priced.
arduous? I know that's not in front of us tonight, but it sort of is. I mean, mixed use is allowed through a PD.
Yeah.
Is the PD, are there pieces of the PD code that people avoid, or is it just the
If you.
planning commission council process?
I'd be happy to show you the PDs on our zoning map, and you can tell me which ones of those, I know of one, but other than that one, which is Cascadia Village, which I think it is more of a traditional PD, in that you have assisted living, apartments, townhouse, you have all the,
Right.
even some commercial. Besides that one, I'd be very interested on anybody here's take on what other PD that's been approved in the city of Sandy really is a PD under the traditional
Right,
sense.
I mean,
of-
the Bornstead Village thing, we always keep talking about the Bornstead Village overlay.
But that's not a PD though.
Well, it's kinda like that, though.
But it's not though. So if you
No.
went through the PD code,
look
I'm
at all
saying,
the-
out of all the
they're all
PDs
just
that have been
residential.
approved, with the exception of Cascadia Village, I don't think any other
100%.
ones have really done anything exceptional that warrants them to be a PD.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I live in a PD that's 100%
And
residential.
do you think it warrants anything to be an exceptional PD, I guess, in the sense of, does
No.
it do anything besides a traditional subdivision would?
No,
Exactly.
No,
So that's
that's all
kind of
it
my
is.
point, yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah, and so all the PDs that I know of, with the exception of one that we've approved, are basically just residential subdivisions with
Mhm.
slightly more
Yeah.
open space.
Yeah, but right, but think it back in history and context. Okay, all those places that was being done, that was the intent, was to build residential. I mean, there's no intent in Cascade Village to build commercial in there.
Well, per your comp plan, there is. There's a
Well,
village commercial in
There
there.
isn't a Wendy's in the middle or a 7-Eleven or anything that looks like it's gonna provide a service to the people that live there.
They're supposed to be, according to your
Daycare.
I
comprehensive
know,
plan.
but they're not, that's why I mentioned Bornstead Village,
Yeah.
it's the Bornstead Village, so it's not that.
Yeah.
It's supposed to have some commercial there, so they don't have to run to town to get milk, right?
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
Well, I don't
Where is
see
it?
Yeah,
I don't see
that
it.
was a-
They're still running to town to get milk with no sidewalks on the road.
That's right.
Okay. We've talked all around. And I still don't have a clear, and we don't have to have, I mean, we can do this on a vote basis of, for the council to see.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Jared, since David's not here, did you open a hearing for this?
Yes.
Do we need to close that then?
Yeah, at some point, we might as well.
Okay.
I move we close the hearing.
Second.
That way we don't forget.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Okay.
Because we're gonna still talk about it anyway,
Right.
right?
All-
7:27.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Should open hearing, close
We-
hearing, same time.
We've done our due diligence on the legal thing.
I
Thank you.
do,
But-
I do have one edit that I think everybody will agree with. At the top of page 2, current subsection B for accessory uses permitted outright would need to become C. Because we inserted A became B,
Oh,
B needs to
Oh,
become
man,
C.
you caught that.
Which one?
Top of
B.
page 2.
Oh, gotcha, yep, you're correct.
174410, now
That
C.
Okay.
Good catch.
I don't know, we may wanna, you sure you wanna vote on that?
Okay, what I'm,
saving that so we can all agree on it.
what I'm thinking that we might, well, I suppose we don't even have to, pass a motion to pass it on, well, we would to pass it on to city council. I'm just trying to think, if we would have a majority vote to strike the beside and behind with the discussion or the caveat that we want this addressed to expand it, we wanna look at it. We're not ready to sign off on it today. We're not saying it's a bad idea. We're thinking in terms of it not being forever before we'll look at it, but as soon as possible.
We'll look at it right after we get the tree code done.
You know, I have to tell you, the tree committee is very busy. We've been meeting a lot. And in fact,
Good.
last week, we went out with a developer and went onto several of the development sites, and we were talking about what works and what doesn't work. And just to talk about how things are changing over the last 13 years. I mean, I'm really appreciative of all the hours and years, just from 1 year on this, I know how much work it is. I really appreciate all the work you've done. Things have changed a lot over 13 years, I'm sure you've seen that. And this particular developer, it was really exciting. What he was talking about was a combination of apartments, townhouses, single-family dwellings that are at the low end, and then going up to executive housing all in one development.
Mhm.
Like, it was really cool, his vision, and with parks and stuff. So
Awesome.
but the tree committee, you can't fault us for not working fast enough. We're
No, I'm
working
not,
really
I'm just
hard.
saying, that's what, the reason I said it was, I want that done first before we get to the second one, so, yeah, we'll get to it, we just gotta get the trees whacked up first. But which kind of brings up, if you haven't seen what's happening over in Estacada on the old highway, just take the old highway out, but just past where the Ford dealer was, big flat piece of ground in there owned by a guy named Mike Park. He's the one who developed, he used to own the sawmill, and then he's the one who started that industrial park that's along the highway there that, I mean, all it was a storage building, and everybody's waiting for it to take off, and now you look at it, and I don't know, what is it? There's gotta be 50 buildings in there. So, but that big flat area is, he's developing it. And you probably know what I'm talking about. I know now, the initial houses they're putting in are the smaller, what we're thinking of, but if you look at the lots in the back, when we think about it, they're gonna be better. But it's gonna cause Estacada to have to build up a whole new elementary school.
A whole new what?
Elementary school. Because they have closed Eagle Creek, as my wife used to teach. And they moved everybody into the two schools, because Estacada was, it was decreasing, in kids. And now, I mean, that's over 300 houses. And if you put 2.5 kids in every house, what does that get you? A whole new elementary school.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's the kind of thing that they're doing there that you're talking about.
Okay. I'm trying to think if we should do a straw vote to see if we could pass the motion. I think we could. If we just do what I just said, we strike the beside and behind for now.
Strike the density section too.
Yeah, the density.
Pardon?
Why are we striking the density?
Because
It only applies to.
Oh,
residential.
yes,
Oh.
yes, and then that
yeah.
box
Okay.
under letter A of that. And with the, not the instructions, it's more of instructions to ourselves that we want to revisit this as soon as possible to
Yeah, and-
fine tune it, and very possibly to open it up beside and behind, but
Well, and you also need to I think, to include it, that we're also in favor of the 20% outdoor storage and
Yes,
55% height.
and the
That's kinda got
55.
lost in the shuffle, but.
Mhm.
They
I
need
just
to know-
have- I just
If
have
we're
one
okay
question
with
for
it, they need to know
clarification.
that.
So by voting yes and having the above the only word remaining in that sentence, it does not make this C2 final?
No, it would make it final after city council, let's assume they get it, they approve it. It would then go into the code. It may only last, it may change in 6 months, 8 months, 9 months, because we'll get back to it, and it may expand. So it's not,
So you can change the code at any time?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, through the process.
So that kind of the
Mhm.
note to the city
Through-
council would be that the planning commission's gonna do some kind of work session and look further into what it would mean to say behind and beside or something.
yeah, I don't know that I'd lock us into saying we do a work session.
I agree.
Just that we intend to address the situation as soon as possible.
Yes, thank you.
Something like.
As soon as practical.
Sorry, I have
Or
practical.
or practical.
I have one more question, sorry.
Yes, no, fine.
So the reason for getting to a yes today seems like we're hastening the process to get it to city council so they can approve it. And I feel like it's because we have people inquiring about the property that might want to do something. And if we were to say no today because we don't have enough detail behind it, we're putting ourselves at risk to maybe lose a potential applicant for that property.
Bingo.
However, I'm
Is that
thinking,
right?
if we said no, does it still go to city council?
Yes.
Yeah, so we could not recommend it to city council.
But it will still go there.
It will still go to them.
Yeah, you're just giving a recommendation, so independent of your recommendation,
Okay.
it would still go.
Yeah.
We would just present the facts,
Mhm.
and then they would decide on what they want
I
to
would,
decide
I
on.
would like
Next
me to
Tuesday.
clarify one thing, Chris. Just because somebody walks through the door and has an idea, to me, is not a reason to change the code, all right? Because they can always apply for a variance, all right? So, we gotta be sure we keep our integrity of the code as the code, and there's a reason for it. And then if we set 30% as an example later, if they come in and they wanna do 40, that's fine, they can come in and apply for a
Present
variance.
their case, right?
I mean, that's why we exist, because if they don't want a variance, we never see it. It goes to them, they sign off on it. I mean, how many projects do we see versus we never see?
Have you had anybody ask you, oh, did you look at this? And I said, no, it met all the requirements, we only look
Yeah,
at stuff that
everything-
doesn't.
Yeah, there's so much that goes on, something pops
Yeah.
up, what happened there? We didn't have anything, we didn't see that. Well, that's because there was, the Panda Express happened. The Jack in the Box happened. We never saw any of those.
Yeah.
They just went with the code.
Follow the rules.
Yeah,
Saw
go for
it
the
at
rules, nobody
land
talked to
division.
us.
You saw it at the land division with the athletic club, the first piece of that.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
it was
yeah,
an
that.
empty lot, yeah.
And they all
Yeah,
came
we
in after.
fussed with it,
Uh-huh.
but the point is that if somebody goes by the code.
Okay, let me suggest, based on what we said, and then we'll do a roll call vote, and it would go. So, here's my recommendation, that the motion be that we recommend approval of the proposed code modifications to 1744, striking beside and behind commercial business, and you can reference it's 4410A, and the 4430, the residential density box. That would, by saying it that way, we're also covering the 55 feet and the 20 or 80%.
Why would we strike the, quote, "a commercial business" after beside and behind? Wouldn't we still want it to read multifamily dwellings above?
He really
A
meant
commercial
just that the
business?
two words are gonna go.
Yeah, just striking, I forget what I said, beside and behind.
That's it.
Okay, sorry, I just thought, I heard you.
I know what he said, but that's not
No.
really what he meant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then that would, and the minutes, I think, will already hold that, and when staff gives the report to city council, they, I assume, will be telling them that we plan to revisit it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
That won't be necessarily in a motion, because we're just
When-
forwarding
when-
this.
Just a recommendation.
You know, this will go to council?
Wait, hang on, Jerry's making the.
Yeah, we can tell you that after the motion, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so is that your motion?
Well, that was a suggested wording for a motion.
Well, I moved what you said. That way we get something on the table.
I second it.
Okay. Been moved and seconded to recommend approval of the proposed codes for chapter 1744 as presented by staff, striking beside or behind in 4410A, and striking the first residential density box under 4430A. I won't mention that, changing B to C, because you'll catch that.
You can mention that. That's good. That way mention that.
You
can
want me
say
to mention that?
Yeah.
Okay. And changing B, accessory uses permitted outright, to C.
There we go. Now it's in the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll do roll call.
Commissioner Carlton.
Yes?
Commissioner Lasowski.
Yes.
Commissioner McLean Wenzel.
Yes.
Commissioner Logan.
Yes.
Commissioner Mobley.
Yeah, yes.
Oh, yes, it's kind of like, yes.
Commissioner Mayton.
I'm a no.
That's fine.
And Chairman Crosby.
Yes. So the motion carries, but it'll show that vote to city council, so.
I was gonna make a discussion on the motion, but I guess it could be after. I support it sort of reluctantly, in part because I'm afraid people aren't doing the PD to get mixed use because of the 50%. And that, so I'm wondering if this would be too much R3 in the C2 zone. You get what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like
That's
is
my
the-
fear.
Is the obstruction really the PD process, or is it the 50% part of the PD process?
Yeah.
Other words,
Yeah.
you're saying
Yeah.
they don't wanna do it because they think 50% is too much?
They don't wanna build more than 50%
You're right.
They wanna go more than 50%
Right.
residential.
Right.
Okay, so that means we need to simply direct them to our residential land.
Or the top of their commercial building, I guess.
Okay, so we made the motion second, we voted. Public hearing was closed. We're down to items from the commission and staff. Any questions or anything to fill us in on?
Yeah, we have a ton of land use applications coming in, kind of a crazy amount. We just
One a
got,
day almost.
well, I think we got like
Yeah.
6 in the last 2 days or something.
Oh, man.
So we got 2 new zone changes, a few new subdivisions, a few new industrial buildings,
Some tree removal, of course.
some tree removal, some at GSA, which is the Forest Service site.
What they
it's
wanna
just in
do?
like the last week.
What do they wanna do on the Forest Service site?
They're just gonna like revise the parking area and take some trees down. So I don't that's not gonna be something before you guys.
Esticated office is moving up here, so
Yeah.
we need to extend.
Being an old Forest Service guy, maybe the whole drill.
The place that was gonna be the snowboard facility, like
Yeah, the from
that's
China.
now
Yeah.
kind of out. I guess there was some fallout between the Taiwanese government and the.
Something about the trade
I don't
tensions,
know.
maybe, huh?
I was gonna get into it, but then I'm like, I don't really know what it is. But anyways, but now they're coming through with a is it an assisted living facility?
Like a senior care facility, I think.
So for the same site, that'll come before you. So I can't really go into the details tonight on that, but
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
That's what it was.
What happened to PGE?
PGE, they've actually decided to just put it on hold for now, so
Okay.
we don't know. It's totally them. They're saying they're looking at their internal something or another on where to put their stuff around the region. So they still have the application in, but they just asked us to put it on hold for the time being. I'm just trying to think. So at the October meeting, we're going to be talking about 100 lot subdivision south of Nicholas Glen, north of Highway 211. So that will be a really interesting one.
Yes. Be
That's not the
careful.
one you were talking about, Hollis, is it?
No.
Be careful on that one. I'll put David's hat on, because there will be a lot of public stuff. There already has been.
Yeah, there's a lot of Facebook stuff.
So we need to keep our eyes closed,
yeah,
or
not
be prepared to declare.
and refrain from saying anything right now. They have a land use attorney already active on it, so I would just refrain from asking many questions on that. There was a public meeting on, when was it? Last Wednesday, and I was the only staff member to attend that. And it was about 46 people from the neighborhood just south that were pretty fired up.
I mean, the Nicholas Glen neighborhood?
Mhm. And so there's, staff's been meeting with them already today, and we're gonna be meeting with that subdivision more. So that will be a very interesting, I anticipate that we'll have at least 50 people here, and it could be.
Is their main concern traffic?
I wanna refrain from saying anything right now,
Yeah,
with them
let's
having a
leave that
land use
alone.
attorney
Well,
involved.
yeah.
You
but
can't say
the way
anything.
the way we'll see it, I guess, is, I know it's gonna be hard to dump out on the 211. So-
Yeah, so I think at this point, I'm really
Yep.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They have a really
Yeah.
good attorney on it. You've met him before, Mike Robinson, so I just wanna refrain from,
Any further discussion?
at a public meeting, yeah. If-
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep, understand.
And then in November, we're gonna be having the dinner at 6 PM, and then David at 6:30 is gonna give a slight overview of the new House bills, so the one you brought up tonight, Dawn, on single-family homes and where you're gonna have to allow duplexes, and how that's gonna impact our zoning code. And then there's another House bill too that he wants to talk about for like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So a little bit of training just mixed in with dinner.
So
and
not the
then-
ex parte that was
The
mentioned in
ex
the.
parte's coming up sooner.
That one
Oh.
is at the
October
October
6th.
7th city council
Oh.
meeting.
Oh,
And that
okay.
is a training that is for city council, and Jordan, the city manager, asked me to just invite all planning commissioners as
Okay.
well. The one on the the one in November will just be specific to those 2 House bills, and it'll be very planning focused, centric.
Okay.
And then after that, I think we're gonna have a zone change, the senior thing at the old hospice site, and then possibly something
I
else.
think the duplex, maybe?
Oh, a duplex within our downtown in the C1, so that'll be a very interesting one. I
The,
guess to discuss.
the senior center would require a zone change?
It does not, but it requires a conditional use. And we did have them, based on the feedback in the last one and the public testimony, on doing a more robust traffic analysis this time around. So they've done more of a robust one up front instead of us conditioning it on the back house.
Yeah,
So-
that's a big, we walked around that, we only live, I throw a rock to it from my house,
Right.
but, so actually but we didn't go around the back very often, you walk by it. You go out the back, and that's a big facility.
It is, yeah.
2 stories.
Mhm.
I don't know how many people you could put in there, but, it's a large, I would think parking could become an issue.
Well, with an assisted living facility, at least a lot of the people can't drive at that point, so it would be alleviated that way.
Yeah, but it's high staff too.
Well, there's parking around the back, but,
Yeah.
it's cliff limited.
Yes, it is cliff
Yeah.
limited. And if you are gonna drive, you need to be careful where you're driving. And then in December, I was trying not to have a meeting, but with all these applications coming in, I
Yeah.
think we're gonna have to.
Yeah.
There's also a decent
September.
chance we might have to have a second meeting in either, like 2 in January or something like that. So I just don't know yet.
Yeah.
It's really gonna depend on how fast a lot of these things progress, but
Mhm.
due to the awesome 120-day rule in Oregon, we have to fit them all in there somewhere, so.
So is there anything that we can do, Kelly? I'm serious. Would a letter from the planning commission to the city council saying, I mean, you guys have been down Rebecca for I don't know how many months she's been gone. It seems like you just don't have
I
enough
would've-
staff to deal with all
Yeah, I
of
mean,
this.
yeah, we're very limited. I mean, we have enough staff to deal with current planning applications, but when you start throwing in there the wants and desires of also doing a lot of long-range planning at the same time, we're very limited. We're kicking off, I'll give you a brief update on a few other small things, or big things, really. So we're just completing the scope and negotiations for the transportation systems plan.
Mhm.
And because Emily and, typically that would be a project that an associate planner or somebody, not a director, would be doing, but because, I'm giving Emily and James so much work that I can't throw that on their plate as well, so I'm actually gonna be doing that.
Mhm.
And then also we're doing the Parks Master Plan, which we've hired a consultant now, but,
Mhm.
planning still has to be involved in that. So there's a lot of stuff out there right now. We're doing also a facilities assessment of all our buildings, which we're inevitably involved in because we're the permitting part of the city.
Mhm.
Tree code.
Tree code.
Tree code.
There are some pressures to do some other code modifications to Sandy style, to our parking section. So I just don't know where all these things are supposed to be done or how they're supposed to be done.
Right.
Are you gonna propose to change those parking standards in C1?
Correct. So that was the big one I was hinting at earlier, is that my proposal is, and it's been for like a year, I didn't think anybody would support it, but my idea is to actually get rid of most of the parking standards in our downtown and let it be a little bit more of a free-for-all, if you wanna say it that way, so that you would maximize density and people can still build parking, and if they do, they would have to follow our parking standards, but there'd be a lot more flexibility as far as the parking requirements. And we haven't put anything to paper yet, but I've kind of backed the envelope, talked to some of our elected officials, and I haven't heard about 4 of them now, and I have, one-on-one, and I haven't heard a single person not like the idea. So I think we are gonna be looking at bringing that before you. It's gonna be kind of a radical thing for this small of a town. And like I said earlier tonight, is we'll see if it works, or we'll see if we regret it, but, like I said, I am challenged or asked to look at more flexible ways to have for our developers and for our business owners. And you have some older buildings in our downtown that have very small or no parking. And if you followed our code to a T, they would have to install parking lots or get parking agreements. This would kind of make that obsolete. So we'll see. And, we'll do a little bit of research into how the code will look, like I said tonight, but it's gonna be pretty revolutionary for a small town. I know the city of Portland does it and a few other locations, but I don't know of another small town in the state of Oregon already doing it. So I don't know if we're gonna have a lot of research for you, because I just don't think there's a lot out there.
McMinnville?
What's that?
Doesn't McMinnville do something? They've got.
They very well might, and
Yeah.
we're gonna look into some
Yeah.
other communities, but I just don't, because we haven't done that research yet, I just don't know what we're gonna find,
Yeah.
essentially. So yeah, I guess getting back to your original question of, are we understaffed? I think if all these things that I've just mentioned, if council desires them all to go forward at the same time, yes, I think we're understaffed,
Yeah.
pretty bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you wanna write something, that's up to you, but
Okay.
I wouldn't.
We did just hire an intern.
Oh, yeah, that's other
and-
projects.
Which is an update too. So the Pleasant Street Master Plan and the downtown walkability assessment were kind of on hold just because of all these current land use applications and our state timeline that we have to meet. So now that we have her hired, those will get started up again, so you should
But what's your
be
total
seeing that soon.
FTE right now of people?
In planning,
In planning.
like 3.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for all the budgeted
For one of the
positions filled,
fastest
or you have
growing
multiple?
2.8, I think, 2.85 maybe. Because I'm only like 50% planning. I have, I have obligations with the building department, which at times are pretty heavy. Obligations with economic development, urban renewal, and stuff like that. So, parks.
Mhm.
So, in a small town like this, that's probably the best part of the job is wearing all those hats. But it's also what causes the most inability to get things done, like planning specific.
Right.
James and Emily are not even full planning because they do other little things here and there. James does sign code stuff that really has nothing to do with anything you ever see.
Mhm.
So,
And
yeah,
we're
so we do have an
one of the
intern doing
fastest growing
some.
communities in the
Right.
state.
Second, I
So-
think, after Happy Valley New again, but.
I'm going up, if the city council doesn't know the workload, okay, then somebody going to those meetings, I mean,
Well, the city manager isn't telling them work.
Right.
Because it really boils down to budget planning, because budget is based upon workload, and so when the budget comes up, these guys either ask for another position or not, and it either hammers through or whatever, but, it's between them and the city managers where they get their staff.
well, I was.
We can
gonna-
write
I
letters,
was-
but
I was
that's
gonna-
where it boils down.
I was gonna say the other one is working with city council to get I completely empathize with the 120-day rule when those things come in. And then, okay, above and beyond those, help me prioritize my work. I've got too much to do here, right?
Mhm.
And, it's one of those things, you guys are great, there's only so much that you can really kick out. So my thing would be going back to city council, if we have that, is what are the priorities? Where do you want the time spent, the extra, that's, if you call it that?
And right now, we don't really have it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the problem, is the current planning, like you were just saying, has to be done. It's state mandated.
Right, exactly.
I really actually hate the 120-day rule. I like that it holds us accountable for getting it done in a timeline, but I also think that depending on the size of the city, there should be more grace in it. Just because, the size of our city, if you get in, I think we have 20-something current applications right now. You only have the staffing to get so many done at a time. So it's a really limiting rule in a lot of ways too for us.
I mean, all the developers kind of sandbag you all at once,
That's kind of,
Yeah.
it seems like that's what's happening.
I know.
I don't know if there's like an anticipated downturn in the economy or something coming
That's what
up.
I
but-
think.
So, and I think I speak for everyone here, but I truly appreciate all the time and effort and how concise and clear just about everything is that comes through. So, and, whenever I call up for something from Kelly or any of the staff, I always get a quick response.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I want to be like
There's
Hollis and
love.
be supportive of you guys as much as possible. So,
Yeah, and I mean that, my reaction to Dawn earlier might have been a little bit odd, but it is kind of like, well, if you guys want to adopt
That's
some or
honest.
recommend approval, that's awesome. If you don't, that's fine, but we're really not gonna, on some of this, we're just not gonna get to look at it for a long time, just
Right.
with current workloads. And it's not trying to say it's not important or that we shouldn't do it that way, but it's just realistic of our time.
Well, and that's why I thought maybe the planning commission needs to say, hey, these guys are trying to do a lot, and, I
Who
don't know,
does
this
set
is
your
more
budget
directed
at
at
the
my
city
fellow
level?
commissioners.
City,
Your
the
division.
budget committee, so it's city council basically.
City council.
But, we just got our biennium budget just set in July 1st essentially, so now it's.
Is it ever, so you do a biennium every 2 years?
Every 2 years, which is awesome for directors, because you don't have to do your budgeting every year.
Right. Well, I'm a director with the state, and I have to go to legislation when I want to ask for more people for my
Right.
division. That's why I was wondering, you don't have to go to legislation, though, you're just going to city council, because you're city government, right?
Right,
But they're going to legislation.
And to be
for
fair-
their Overall budget.
Yeah, and to be fair with city council and, my manager, is that, they did expand our department. I mean, we do have one more associate planner than we had 3 years ago, but I think we didn't, we would really be in trouble right now, but, so they have expanded our department. It's just, I think our department's appropriate sized if we were just doing current planning. I think the problem is we're trying to take on both current planning and long range, which are both needed in one of the hottest times ever in the state of Oregon for.
So the staffing, the additional staffing may be better placed in other places.
It'd be long range.
To take things off of
Yeah.
your plates.
I think if we had additional staff member, I'd just have that person be a long-term. And I've talked to the city manager, Jordan, and I said at some point, because council really wants to do a comp plan change right now too. I said, I don't know who's gonna do that, but I think at some point Sandy is growing fast enough that at some point, I think within the next 4 to 6 years, in the next 2 or 3 bienniums, you will see the pressure to have a long-range planner on staff, and that's all that person does. You know, Happy Valley has like 2 or 3 of them. A lot of cities, even our size, are now beginning to have at least one half-time FTE. That's all they do is long range. So I think at some point, the city of Sandy will be kind of forced, I think, with that reality.
What's our population now? It's over 10, right?
I think it's like 11.5 or somewhere around there.
11.5?
I don't know if that, I don't think that really counts that new apartment complex, which probably added another 300 or 400 people. So I think we're getting close to 12,000.
Very good.
Okay.
I have one quick just heads up. So normally when we present,
Oh, yeah, thank you.
yeah, so when we present like reports, they're in a certain format that sort of just copies and pastes the code and then has a response. For these next few coming up, again, due to workload, we talked to David, our lawyer, and it doesn't seem like it has to be in that format for any reason. So we're gonna be doing the report is kinda gonna be in a draft order, basically. So it's gonna be in the order format, which just is, you know, the findings numbered. It's just a different format and it has less copy and pasting from the code. So that's just sort of a heads up. It's gonna be the same information, the same kind of response, but just an abbreviated like code section. So you'll have your code that you can refer to. It'll, you know, say section, you know, 1790-120.
But you won't be
A1 or
cutting and
whatever.
pasting the code in for us.
Right, exactly. There might be some little pieces that are cut and pasted in, but it won't be verbatim so much. So it's just it will save us time to not have to reformat everything into 2 different format documents, basically.
Well,
And we actually,
So-
we have a consultant right now that's doing some analysis for things we could change to be maybe more efficient and stuff like that. And that was actually one of his, and he was the community development director of Lebanon and then somewhere else before that. So he's been around, I think, in land use planning in Oregon for 40-something years. And he said that's one of the first things he would recommend doing, is kind of making it so the staff report and final order are more of one and the same document, so you can kind of, you know, get them over for your signature and review a lot faster, and really decrease the amount of staff time in pasting and copying and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, he obviously has seen it work someplace else for him to recommend it.
And Dupin said that a lot of communities that he represents are now doing it that way as well. So he said in his opinion, even though it's really nice for the commissioners and the public, it is kind of behind the times insofar as how people are presenting staff reports now.
So I think it'll probably be like a 1-page maybe cover kind of thing, which already sort of happens in our new online system anyway. But then rather than sort of the report, it's gonna be more draft order. So it's gonna be worded like an order, basically. But it's really all kind of recommendation up for debate, you know, all of that. So.
And we'd love your input after the next one to say what is great about it, and honestly, just be honest with us about what was confusing.
I'm sure
or
you'll
hard.
get it.
Well, and we're expecting it. I mean,
it might be helpful because it will sort of be what you would be approving or denying, or, you know, approving with conditions or whatever. Basically,
Awesome.
this is the document, and so anything you want to tweak on that, we could discuss, but it'll be worded more like an order.
Okay. Somebody want to move us out of here?
I move we go home.
I second it.
Been moved and seconded to go home. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
aye. What was it? 9:08.
Have to go directly now?
9:08.
Thank you.
I won't get my
Jerry, I'll send you a
required.
email to remind you about next month. Just as a documented source.
You remind me about what?
I'll be in Denver next month.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well.
Unfortunately, I won't be here for the riot.
Kelly will know.
Okay.
Well, we may need your chair.
I got an administrator's conference.
Jerry's helping.
Yay.